If you recognize this theme song, you're probably a fan of the 1980s anime phenomenon Voltron. Since its coming to the States, by way of St. Louis by the way, it's been an incredible cultural icon that's evolved through various iterations and reboots that continue even to this day. World Events Productions in the Central West End produced a new iteration for a new generation that aired on Nicktoons, Voltron Force. I recently had the privilege to sit down with producer Jeremy Corray to talk about what it was like working with a classic and beloved animation property.
Thank you, young Padawan. Let me say, your listeners and viewers will know all the secrets by the end of this episode. Because as I was telling you, this is the only one where the guest gets to reverse polarity and interview you a little bit. So, and I think, we've learned together in the industry, and hopefully we can share some insights, whether folks are just getting started or in the middle of the career. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, agreed. I will. One thing I will say at the outset, and I said, and I did a little about me video. One of the things that was very cool. So I interned with you in 2011. One of the things that was very cool.
That's right.
Interning with you is that you did not seem to really care that I was an intern. You gave me all kinds of opportunities that I felt like an intern shouldn't get to do. So I was appreciative of that even then.
Well, yes, probably more out of necessity as well. And yes, you're a talented artist and storyteller. But let's face it, Wes, when I first saw you, I said, yes, that guy will fit in the Voltron mascot that we had just ordered from Madewell Mascots in Canada. And it was a heck of a time. Your first night was the premiere of Voltron Force. We were talking 10 years ago. It's the 10th anniversary of Voltron Force on Nicktoons, the show that sort of begat Legendary Defender and Voltron, as you know, it returned to the airwaves. What was that like for you being thrown into the premiere party? What were some of the things you were doing? You were helping with social media. I remember with, the Facebook page and all the fans on the Voltron Facebook page.
Yes. Yeah. I was doing a lot of the social media stuff, coming up with banners and icons and things to promo the show. I mean, to answer your question specifically, what was it like for me? I mean, it was a dream come true. Here I was, a kid in St. Louis who wanted to work in animated TV. And the day after I start, is the premiere of this show on Nicktoons for this iconic. Yeah.
And we got to go to San Diego Comic-Con together. That seems like the before times, right? Walking through a San Diego crowded Comic-Con hallway age seems like maddening in the day of COVID. Yes. But you got to meet some of your heroes at Comic-Con, I remember. I mean, it was just such a blast that we shared together. Who were we? We were in a restaurant or something. And who are some of the heroes that you got to meet?
Well, I will say the writer on Voltron Force. Was that Todd Garfield? Yeah. I thought was the coolest dude ever. He had got his start working on Samurai Jack, which was Samurai Jack. And it is still my favorite show.
Yeah,
and this guy he was there. Started out production.
He's right there.
Got to production coordinator. So honestly, getting to share a room with him for a weekend was
you literally shared the room with the Samurai Jack guy. It was awesome. I mean, speaking to the fans and. Yeah, it just, and just jumping in. I mean, like you raised, nearby 80s baby fan of G.I. Joe, the Transformers, He-Man, all that Reagan era deregulation and loving it, right? And playing with the toys. And it was all part of the experience and looking at the Sears catalog and imagining, different time blocks and things that Channel 11 KPLR. So it really was a story of connecting the dots as far as my journey into animation with, I remember in college calling up World Events Productions, who, is the company that owns Voltron worldwide, and wanting to start a show called Saturday Morning Noontoons for SPC-TV, which was a dorm channel. It's kind of YouTube before YouTube. It was our own, Wayne's World. Anything we'd program in there. We showed movies and everything from Swank Motion Pictures locally. So they sent some 3/4-inch tapes of, not only Voltron, Defender of the Universe, but Denver the Last Dinosaur, He's Your Friend and a Whole Lot More, Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs, and another one, Vitor the Starfire Champion. So little did I know, coming out of college, doing short films, and, our idea of animation was things like, we did a very crude and rude remix of 80s cartoon characters called Old School Afternoon that got into Wizard Magazine back in the day. It won one of their contests or won a category. Kevin Smith was supposed to call. Still waiting for that call, Kevin Smith. And Matthew Seinreich was one of the editors over there at Wizard, who later went on to create Robot Chicken. So it is strange to see everyone kind of coming up. We were doing the short films, and that directly led to my job at Koppler Communications, which is a sister company of World Events Production. So I just sort of weaseled my way in, thanks to Tiffany Ilardi, who you have fond memories of, I'm sure, and still keep in touch with, who is the managing director over there. And, this was at kind of a low point for Voltron as far as the rights to the DVD were still out, the rights to the movie. A lot of that had been sort of locked away in a Lionsgate vault. So a lot of it was untangling those rights deals. And my role specifically just started off with things like, the Voltron store, the store about Voltron.com that still exists today. And literally out of a closet, we were selling VHS tapes, and then we started to do t-shirts. And I started to transfer some of those other properties like Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs to DVD, Vitor, the Starfire Champion. I remember we released the DVD of Vitor and sold like 25 that day and thought, this is fantastic. We had the deluxe edition. We actually found animation cells in the old KPLR television studio. We would, let fans buy some of those. So it was like an archaeology through your childhood. And I remember that someone called and said, this isn't the right Vitor. And it turns out it was a compilation for the movie from overseas. So we had to completely redo another DVD. So you were always discovering things. And, but it was, I look back so fondly on it. Bob Koppler and I are still good friends, and Ted Koppler for giving my break and you a break, and everyone. I mean, he's such a connector of talent and, a real visionary in entertainment. And Voltron itself is a fascinating story, how that comes about.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think kind of one of the big shocks to me when I started working with you at World Events Productions was that Voltron, this iconic, this classic thing that I grew up watching, was in St. Louis, was in the Central West End.
Yes.
Like, this is where it happened. Came over.
Midwest boy.
Yeah,
Japan.
Which is crazy. It's funny you mentioned too, Denver the Last Dinosaur. I definitely grew up watching that. And I even found some old cells, even in my day.
Yes. It's fascinating. And we pay homage to the Wild West of the 80s animation and, the story of Voltron being a accident in that it was going to be 3 different series. They asked for the one with the lion, which was supposed to be Daltanius, and they sent over Beast King Go Lion, which, the legend is Ted said, stop, you can watch this with the sound off and still understand the story. And it is a fascinating classic show and a real mix of different styles, whether, it's religious symbols and medieval mashed up with future. So we'll see a Voltron movie someday or a TV series or something. It's going to happen. But being a part of some of those developments was super cool. And certainly, there always was buzz about a new television property. And it wasn't until Bob Koppler came along and he really untangled a lot of those rights and things, helped us get with, the DVDs that folks remember, the tin DVDs, and a lot of those remastering with like Media Blasters. So it was awesome. And really, in a lot of ways, we formed our own Voltron force to come together with the different properties and business things that had to happen in order for Voltron Force to happen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know you were a supervising producer on Voltron Force, the show, in 2011. But I know producer can be kind of a lot of different things. What did that mean specifically for you at World Events and on this show?
Yeah, I don't know if supervising producer is the best title, reflecting back. It was probably more just guardian geek in that you're protecting Voltron as an IP, and it's always a collaboration, right? So it would be myself and Bob, producers like Jason Netter, Susan Norkin, who is the line producer on the show, who's now gone on to Mattel and all these fantastic things, who you should also have on this show, by the way. It was everything from art design to approval to managing all of the different arms of the business that were coming in to form this series. The television series was just one aspect of the entire, this was at a real crossroads where Netflix hadn't taken hold, and kind of streaming video on demand in the world that we see it now hadn't taken hold. So we still needed a broadcast television partner, which was very cool. Keith Dawkins, president over at Nicktoons. I mean, these conversations, Voltron was the easiest thing we ever had to sell, because you'd call up and just Voltron, yes, Voltron. And suddenly you'd be in a Sony boardroom. So it was a combination of partners like THQ, God rest their soul, RIP, in the video game realm, the toy partner in Mattel, and everyone from home video, Classic Media, which was later bought by DreamWorks to become DreamWorks Classics, which is why you saw things like Peabody and Sherman and all of these revivals. So it really taught me the world of licensing or as we used to call it, even licensing, where you would have the different rights, and just the power of intellectual property, and just the power of something that is, a legacy, and it sounds kind of corporate, but transgenerational, where people are passing on to their kids this experience through Voltron. So it was fantastic to help interact with the fan base, weigh in on everything from casting to animation itself, and just always trying to plus up the show. Always trying to plus up the show with Todd Garfield, and I would be on the phone late nights, and on a lot of ways helping break stories with him, help whether I succeeded or not, be the guardian of Voltron canon. But it was just such a great experience to have 26 episodes, which is kind of a season 2, and it's great to see that the show has found its fans on YouTube and things, because it wasn't a huge budget show, but the things we did to put that show together were pretty amazing. And while I have my shoulda, coulda, wouldas about it, and the form of the art direction, I think fans are appreciating Todd Garfield's writing, his humor, and his approach to the show, which might have been just a couple years too early, right? Is probably the action humor type thing, but it really his writing really helps save the show. So I encourage fans who haven't seen it. It's kind of a self-aware Voltron show.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's in terms of bringing it back in 2011. Was it just sort of a perfect storm of what made this? I know Voltron had made a couple of comebacks in the 90s, but what made the time right specifically for Voltron Force to happen when it did?
Well, it was Bob Koppler being able to take these things, and unpack the rights first off with Lionsgate. I think there was a home video deal that had a lot of rights for the movie in there, rights at first look of a TV, and it was probably a decent home video deal at the time, but we had moved on from some of that. So it needed somebody to go in there and just unpack these things and then assemble the right team and be able to, say yes. So, Voltron fans really owe him everything you see coming out with Voltron, new media wise, was a result of his hard work and, working with his dad. And they didn't always agree on different things, because I say the biggest classic Voltron fan was Ted. He wanted the original music, and in his mind, we had this winning formula. So I joke at VoltCon, the Voltron convention that is every October, that it really was, I understand where J.J. Abrams, and I'm not comparing talents of our team to his team by any means, but I do understand the pain of a classic property and the expectations, and how do you balance the classic with new. And in a lot of ways, those new Star Wars trilogy, down to, our 3 characters who look even similar to them. Like, I understand, JJ. I understand where you're coming from, and the balance you have to do between new and old fans. And unfortunately, I think we're living in an age where, that only gets even more toxic. You hear that term, toxic fandom. But I think once you've been a part of something that, creating and putting that much effort in, and you see how something is assembled, you're much more lenient on, movies, entertainment, anything, because the fact to even get it done, as is a miracle in itself. So you sort of, you lay off on folks. You say, well, I understand what they were trying to go for here, but there's just so many X factors that sometimes can come in. For us, I think a lot of the reason was it didn't come out on Netflix soon enough. We were at an age, and nobody maybe pinged it, but it was the Breaking Bad, the Mad Men effect, where viewers were discovering shows on Netflix. And so I think by just 6 months, if we would have premiered right there on Netflix, kids would have discovered the show. And when we came back with new episodes, may have found it, because it was still in that weird, borderline between cable television and the streaming wars. But it all worked out in the end. The Voltron Legendary Defender series, amazing. I haven't been able to finish it because it looks so good. It's sometimes heartbreaking to watch, but it looks like everything I could have wanted it. But fans can watch the classic. They can watch all these different flavors, just like Transformers and a lot of other properties.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned J.J. Abrams when he kind of took the torch for the Star Wars franchise, because I remember seeing in an interview someone else speaking about the Star Wars Holiday Special. His answer, for sort of like, gosh, why did you guys do this? Was he said, this wasn't precious yet. We were just having fun.
This wasn't precious yet. We were having fun, and the network wanted it, and the rating the Star Wars holiday special rating. I'd love to know what it was, but you'd kill for it. It's probably Super Bowl ratings these days.
But
that's great.
The point being, it was like, we could just have fun because it was just Star Wars, and now it's sort of infamous and that sort of thing. Once fans take hold of a property, and it becomes precious to them, suddenly the creators of that property are much more limited in what they're able to do with it. And I know you had to experience some of that with Voltron. And I do recall, conversations about, how can we push the envelope a little bit? And, I'm just kind of curious,
animation wise, angles. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that how you kind of looked at pushing things a little bit in terms of technique or?
I mean, you were right there with me behind the desk, probably reviewing some of these storyboards, I imagine. And, I think Voltron, animation wise, and by no means am I, animation school, but, a fan certainly from anime days back in the ages where you had to rent Akira on a VHS or Ninja Scroll and early Toonami. So love for animation. You quickly realize, techniques and things you couldn't quite put your finger on. And with Voltron, it's always scale, right? It's how do you communicate scale and the largeness of Voltron and whether that's referenced right next to him. And so I think that was an area that we always tried to push, that it didn't feel like, we always said, one of the brand pillars is a kid describing, and his sword can cut the moon in half, like how can that epicness just be conveyed in that? So we were always trying to push that. Todd did a great job with the characters, even balancing that many cooks in the kitchen and that many, King Alfor needs to be in there, and then we need our classic characters, but they're passing the torch, as it were. And so it was tough. It was really hard. But how do you break the mold of Voltron, of kind of a row beast of the week, kind of those traditional Sentai shows, which were stripped 52 episodes and just cranking out a monster of the week, which, you go back and it was nothing if charmingly formulaic as far as, reusing animation. And certainly we would do that where we could. It was always a joke of like, you have to have your flashback episode once a season. They all have to flash it back to some animation just to save on there. That was a Jason Netterism. But the things we did to pull off the show and how well it was received, and I think fans are appreciating it more and more as far as 10 years later now. So who knows? Maybe a season 2 could still happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I remember just as an intern on that project, it was, like I said, it was a dream come true. There was a lot I got to learn in terms of here's an animatic and here's how you watch an animatic, and the notes that
giving notes, man.
Yeah, and here's the ones that you do. Yeah. And, that was all very interesting. There's one instance I wish I would have had a little bit more good sense. There was a voice recording that we were doing pickups for something. They just had to get a couple extra lines. I think you had to step out for a second, like, Wes, just take over. And I wish I would have realized I'm not the director. Because I quickly
do it with a British accent.
Yeah, I quickly discovered that the guys on the other end they didn't need I didn't. But
what'd you do? Did you chime in?
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to direct, they're like, they're doing 3 takes, and I didn't realize, you do a couple takes and pause. And so I was like, you know what, try it more like this, of not knowing the context.
That's awesome.
At the time. So that was,
listen,
they were kind.
You appreciate the audio side, especially in that. Well, there you go. You got to fly the black line for a while, form the head, but form blazing sword. But the audio side was probably my favorite, the mixing. And the composing, and it still is, as far as just when something feels complete, as just from doing things like, Safety Squad, where that to me, and we always joke that you got to do some, to clients and say, hey, the audio, this is not the final audio, but I think in the end, I have the same thing where I want to hear it it just makes it, and what that show looked like from a, you're like, oh, it's silent and it's just kind of temp sounds and things. And when you got in that room and mixed that show and the layers of lions, roars, and the sounds and the unique things and the inspirations, it's fantastic. And I think that's what, Star Wars or a lot of these fantasy things, that sound design. And I think that's a good lesson for animators and creators out there, as far as just, that can sell a lot of, animation shortcomings and things. So, don't forget sound design. There's a tip for designers. Befriend a good sound designer. And I think that does speak, Wes, to just tips as far as creators and things out there is, recognizing maybe your weaknesses or where your shortcomings are, where you need help, and not being afraid to collaborate and bring people in who can help with some of those things. Maybe you're a great character designer, but whatever, your walk cycles and things like that. So I think collaboration is just so key, and even just being honest with yourself on storytelling wise, and like, maybe I can't be whatever, the Peter Jackson of all of this, and keep this going. So I encourage, especially young animators starting out, to collaborate and things. So
yeah, no, that's good advice. I totally agree. I tell people, once you get an audio pass, you can't go back. You can't continue to make projects that don't collaborate with an audio designer, because it really takes to the next level. And that was definitely true of Voltron Force in terms of the score, in terms of the sound design, in terms of the mixing. Completely agree. But Voltron, as a show, is more than just a show. It's video games, it's fandom, it's action figures, it's toys. So
intellectual property.
Yeah, when you're working on a show like Voltron Force, how much do you have to think about those other things, those video games or the action figures?
It is. There's, like I mentioned, you had the video game company, and especially the toy company, Mattel, who those were super talented people. And we'd often ask for their help in even just designing Robies and things like that. They were all Voltron fans as well. So it's definitely the inmates. We were all kids getting a crack at our favorite IP. So you have to balance what worked about it with something that evolved it. I feel like we stumbled upon that in that, kids were raised by Power Rangers and probably knew Zords and Power Ranger things more than Voltron. There certainly was that line, but what Saban did for generations was really repeat the Voltron formula, which back in the day, I can distinctly remember, like a lot of kids drawing like, what if a wolf Voltron, and what if there was a stallion Voltron and things, so it wasn't enough to have 5 robots coming together to form a super robot. But when we came up with the center formation thing, I felt like that gave it a little bit of a Ben 10, a popular show at the time, spin on it, where you could do a little bit of rock, paper, scissors with different things. And, now yellow's going to be the head, and that will be, hunkified and have wrecking balls and change these different things. So, or Allure's in the middle, and now it's water-based weapons and things. So I felt like that kept things interesting. I only wish fans had a chance to play with some of those toys that were approved and ready to go and had the little wrecking balls and things. And then Todd Garfield coming up with the Voltcon, the wrist thing. So you really had these in the toy company's mind and in our minds. We're just big kids, and the toys were sort of an extension of the fantasy and the universe. It was always going to be about different levels of play. So you had the one-on-one on the ground, then you had the lion levels with the sidearms and stuff. So it was no problem to come up with toyetic elements. I don't think you could ever do as much for the show. They would always want the episodes to be a lot about, what's the new boss of the week or the new battle. So you had the network that was wanting standalone episodes versus something that could be, that all followed serialized, So it is funny to see the Legendary Defender show do everything that we were told we can't do with Voltron Force, tell an overarching story. But again, I look at Todd Garfield's writing. He managed to balance that, where you did have a season arc going on while the episodes could also be enjoyed standalone. Probably not maybe the first 3 and the last 3. So you're always answering to some level, and you're creating decks and things to keep people excited, and you're pre-selling a lot of these, territories based on, hey, we're going to have 52 episodes. So totally different world now as far as, Netflix ordering in bulk and all the streamers and things like that. Which is fantastic. I mean, it truly is nerdvana. It's what a world to live in, that I've got an arcade that has every game from my childhood, behind me playing on MAME, and I can pull up on my phone every classic series. I just, you lived a bit of this, but, for the young Padawans out there who, going to a Blockbuster Video, or just, before that, I mean, just Laserdisc or things, like you had to hunt down content and animation, and seeing something like Disney's Black Cauldron in the theater and things. I mean, these were just such rare things to get a hold of, and you'd wear it out Even the things like the Fisher Price had a whole cartridge you put in the Mickey Mouse thing, and I think that's where I started to really appreciate animation at a young age. You saw the frames and you saw what they were doing, the animators in it. So, but it's been fantastic. My son now is into anime and things and watching Naruto, and I knew Tracy at Viz Media, so getting that glimpse into all of the licensing and things is it's just fantastic. And I love seeing where new IP will come from, whether it's things like Minecraft or Fortnite, and even just some of the YouTubers and things, what people do to monetize, and Mr. Beast and stuff. So I think it's never been a better time to be a content creator, but it's also really hard to break through with a lot of this stuff. So I think a tip, and we can get into it too, is for people interested in animation, is don't just limit yourself to artist, illustrator, storyteller. There's so many other jobs within animation, including the business side, whether that's budgeting for animation or working for a line producer like a Susan Norkin, and learning how the behind the scenes things of casting and, dealing with actor contracts and things, being an accountant, learning how to raise money for your own project, and just the licensing and business side of it is absolutely fascinating. And it's a competitive thing, but most people are nice in the industry. And there's different animation, and look at where you've been able to monetize your skill set in animation. So it doesn't have to be necessarily, in the, traditional, blue sky and things, these studios, which, let's face it, a lot of that talent, that's a tough life, that's sleeping under your desk type thing. So I just encourage folks that, maybe starting out, like, take a little bit of a different path in, maybe than the expected, I'm the next Gendy. And that's okay. You can be the guy helping out Gendy, or the gal helping out Gendy, or, so there's lots of different ways in, but I encourage folks to look at things like licensing. It's a fascinating world.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've heard plenty of stories of people who are now big names in the animation industry who started out in a different path, even within animation, and got put into a different department and discovered, oh my gosh, I'm really good at this, or I really like this, or this is more what I want to do. I think that those kinds of stories are really interesting and maybe more prevalent than people realize.
Yeah. And as you and I have talked about, and just you as someone who has a lot of irons in the fire in different projects, like, start with something small, whether it's a little web comic or a series, or just, IP can come from so many different places, a children's book and things like you're working on. There's so many different ways to go at it. And sometimes it's almost better to have something that's small, but powerful. And that, you look at something like Hair Love, the Lion Forge folks did, like, that spun off. Like, what a great example. Like, do the short film, show the promise of this world, and that can open up if you try to take it all on yourself and make, Fantastic Planet or just some, like, I'm going to do this all myself. That's a harder path for sure, particularly on a feature film. Like, we've had those conversations. So yeah, I mean, I think yourself through things like this too, that, doing the podcast, I think it's really smart. Like, you're meeting new people, understanding, and it's a great excuse to, make new friends.
So you and I continue to work together after even Voltron.
Oh yeah,
we both ended up at Coolfire Studios in St. Louis. As I said earlier, you are now the vice president of visual entertainment. I was doing editing, shooting, animation, all that stuff. Even after managing kind of an iconic brand like Voltron, something that's been around for decades and things, you got to pivot and work with other branded entertainment, other branded content for animation, specifically animation for Build-A-Bear and animation for the law firm Brown and Crouppen.
Yeah, well, I love animation. Yeah, and one of our first projects too, you remember, was Toby McBeard. When we came over to Coolfire. And that was just something we were just sideburning, and managed to, I use the word sell. It wasn't a mega deal that you read about in Variety, but a short content for DreamWorks TV, which was their YouTube channel at the time, and still can be viewed somewhere out there. So that was just a passion project that we ended up, selling and justifying our time on. But I quickly realized that you couldn't make a business out of that. You needed to go where the brands who had the budgets were. And so, yeah, Build-A-Bear, we did, 3 years of Bearville Live, which was more puppet. There was animation involved in it. I wish we could have done more animation. Somewhere, there's animation that Mike Hackett, one of the puppeteers and character in himself, who you should have on the show, he did a whole, straight Hackett animation for that. But I know you've got a chance to do a little bit of light animation on it, and we'd always incorporate things, and even pizza ads and things. We'd always look for a chance to do animation on something, and with your talents, we knew it would turn out to be something quality and unique. And I think that's what led us to, of all places, a law firm to do an animated series, which really came from, Terry Crouppen, who, if you grow up in St. Louis, his face, his voice. It came from his having a true place of family safety. And Safety Squad was a title that I was going to do a sketch comedy thing with that, but it's a perfect little title for a little pint-sized Safety Squad superheroes, and it was a perfect fit.
There. What? It's the safety signal.
Sir, there's a risk of a dog bite near Forest Park.
A dog bite risk? Oh no! The bad idea bandit. Well, not today. Charlie Ruby, dog bite risk in progress, and bad idea bandit's already up to his old tricks. Kids, I need you to handle the situation. I'll be there as soon as I can.
You've got it, boss. We're on it.
I mean, on that show, I just sort of got the heck out of the way, and you and Josh York and Mickey all worked on that. And I think, again, the same principles, though, of looking at a storyboard, timing, like little mini Pixar, right? And just saying, what are the beats? How does this feel? Like, that's just so important. You will forgive a lot of animation, hacks. If the story is working for you, you're into it. So that's still my favorite part, is just the pacing as far as the pre-production goes, and then certainly the post, the sound design and voicing over and stuff. So we had a lot of fun, yeah, and I'm sure we'll find some excuse to work with each other again. And we're doing storyboards and things, which is another way to monetize your animation skills through things like animatics, which you're helping us out on right now. And I think that's a way, like learning storyboards for commercials and pre-visualization is a fantastic skill set to have. So, many different ways to make a living as an animator, besides, being somewhere and doing cell work and things like that, which is a hard slog for sure.
Yeah, that was actually something similar to Jeff Keane, who founded Coolfire Studios, had told me early on. He said, find the studio you want to work for. Just get in the door, do whatever needs to be done. And from there,
whatever needs to be done. And
it was true in my case. I ended up working at Coolfire Studios for several years, and I ended up getting into and enjoying aspects of film and media that I wrote off in college. In college, I said, I'm not doing this. This isn't going to be my job. I'm not gonna, and it turns out
you were good at it.
Yeah, you get into it and you learn things and you grow in different ways, and you discover, I actually really enjoy this aspect of,
You're creating, yeah, and your storytelling and the way you have become and are, a fantastic editor and pacing. And we would do things like, our friend Ed Herman's show, Ed Versus, where, this lawyer, on the surface, you'd say, oh, this lawyer is talking about, movies and cereal. But the way you would get in there and pace it and the timing of it really became a character in the show, along with Ed, who's got hilarity and is smart. And you would just be, meet this guy for 10 minutes and you're like, well, this is my lawyer, but happens to be a big geek like us and a geek about many different things, and really he has a hack for everything, and probably changed my life more than anyone. He's my life coach as far as just things that I have on, from Allbirds to underwear to jeans to whatever. Ed's got the better way to do things. And that was a fantastic run that, I hope we can get you to guest spot edit on some of these things. Roxanne's doing an amazing job too, collaborating, but you established the formula with Ed. I mean, you two sitting there really, and that has become an Emmy Award winner now. And so is your Safety Squad. So I think you're a great example as far as somebody who has managed to monetize their skill set, and now in your role I just feel like there's that folks could learn from you for sure, especially young folks coming out. But there's tremendous talent out there. You look at your intern Mickey, and I'm glad to see you paying it forward. And we've used her on some things. And Sarah Gibson is an animator we're using for a thyroid campaign. And that sounds like, oh, thyroid. If you're in college, you're like, I'm going to be Miyazaki. But like you can make it as cool as you want. Like there's a way, and it's beautiful. There's watercolors and the butterfly effect. Look at pharmaceuticals alone. God bless pharmaceutical ads, because animation companies are absolutely, whether it's every pharmaceutical has some mascot from some owl, or somebody's going to tell you about whatever, constipation, some groundhog. I don't know what, or that actually fits. But it's just, there's always something out there for animators, and that's the commercial side too. And, Matt Beebe, producer at our studio, he was at Janimation down in Dallas, I believe. And they're a shop as well that, do animation for commercials and things. So lots of different ways in, and I just, I encourage folks, even you in a whatever smaller mid-market have found a way. And now with the internet, we're collaborating with motion graphics folks who are in California. And so you don't have to be tied to it. I think having enough diversity while also, of diversity of execution and style, and you look at while also having a distinct flavor and POV is probably a good place to start. And you look at folks like Lion Forge and what they've managed to accomplish out of St. Louis, and it's amazing. And certainly World Events, I think you'll be hearing things from them and announcements. So it was awesome. We always love to cultivate new talent, and you're certainly one of them, Wes.
Thanks. No, that's I think that's great advice. Do a good job on the project you have, on the small thing, because that's what, like you said, we all want to be Miyazaki out of college and things, but my favorite director, Ridley Scott, started in commercials, and, you start small, just, and people notice.
Well, my God, when Ridley Scott was doing, Apple ads and things, those commercials were, and you look at Anheuser-Busch and the folks who worked on those in the 70s and 80s. Those were productions, pirate ships, and just the level that they would go to on that. It's insane. Another talented guy, Zach Jones, he's fantastic. He, lives out in the middle of Missouri and has always loved animation and just always done these like 16-bit inspired things. Fantastic and just quick. And we've got him helping out with things like, Barnes Jewish Hospital, Science of Blues hockey show, and he's doing hearts and things. So the animation fundamentals he's managed to use, and so the opportunities are out there, and I think it takes a lot of time, but it takes thinking of yourself as a brand. I am my own brand. What do I stand for? And I think when people will need you, you've got to be there, and as you know more than anyone, you have to deliver and maybe be open to new experiences. And I think your experience at Coolfire is a fantastic example of, if you're walking in day one and saying, hey, I want to do all this animation stuff, they're going to, well, we don't know how to sell that, blah, 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 blah. But you came in, you played, the game with whatever, editing, reality TV, being able to go through 20 hours of footage and tell a story and string outs and things like that. And then showed your animation side. And then it was easy for me to sell that to folks as a viable medium in post-production. Oh, we have this fantastically talented animator here. How about this? So had a lot of fun, in addition to all the side hustles, which get harder and harder with family, as we know, Wes, but still out there. And now we have the next generation too, where we can live all of our dreams through our children. I swear my daughter, I'm like, she can be the filmmaker. Wait a minute here. In this age of YouTube and all of this stuff, it's, again, great time to be a creator. It's probably tougher it's more competitive for sure. But, you don't need that many people to make a living if you produce something that in the age of Patreon, there's also that too, of just those microtransactions. So everything's sort of fractionalized, but it's truly pure bliss. I love it, that just the amount of content we have. And I'm not a theater snob. I love going to the movie theater. I love an Alamo Draft House, and certainly think that will never go away, the communalness of it. But there's also something nice to having a blockbuster video, or as Spotlight Video was my jam in Highland, Illinois, the mom and pop videos. in the palm of your hand. So it's just such a great time to nerd out on whatever you want, whatever you're into.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think I think for that reason, a lot of nerdy properties are coming back in new iterations, new shows, new iterations.
I said to Bob Koppler, it's a IP arms race, and all these streamers now, and that's what makes me optimistic about Voltron, is there's only so many properties that have that factor, where everybody, I kind of remember that. And that's all they need to just get you to kind of watch it or buy a ticket to the movie theater. And, as I've also told Bob too, it's like, boy, you got this incredible show on Netflix. I mean, that's the win. What's more culturally relevant than having a show on Netflix? I mean, I put your initials in the high score in the arcade, man. So funny. The Avengers game from the 90s is running, and there's a perfect example of IPs that were in the trash. They were definitely penny stocks, literally, and just how with the right creators you can come in and just breathe new life into these things. As far as, it's mind-boggling to me to know that I'm watching a show. If you would have told me in the 1987 there'll be a show about Vision and Wanda, and we're watching this, like these D-list characters that only hardcore folks knew, I would have said that's crazy. But now we're in just such a beautiful world, and it's done with such resonance. So I think you have the era of talented creators being able to take material that maybe in different hands would have been, less well received, and doing such a fantastic job. And I think that is where the Spielbergs came in and sort of legitimized the B movie. And then now we've sort of just made it kind of high art, or has our standards lowered? I don't know. I don't think so. I think this is good storytelling, Avengers Endgame and thing. I mean, I think this is just great storytelling. So it's fantastic. It's a great time to be alive.
Yeah. Jeremy, thanks for a great interview. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. And sorry if I ramble, but that's part of the extra value I like to give your viewers and listeners. And again, encourage folks to, set small goals, quarterly goals for yourself. Start small, start mighty, and follow through. And the only way things happen is if you put good content out in the universe. And I think we've both had experiences where you couldn't sit in a room and make a PowerPoint saying these things were going to happen. It just all started with messy progress. Is a phrase I use a lot these days, of just like, we're making messy progress here. It's not pretty. It's not perfect, but we're just kind of doing it. So, and believe me, I'm still learning that myself and have all these side projects I want to do, but it was nice to take some time out and catch up with an old friend.